There we go. All right, well, good afternoon. We'll do our best to reduce any feedback. And we just want to welcome you all for joining. We are broadcasting live from Facebook and YouTube. And my name is Jasmine. My friends call me Jazz. I use pronouns she and they. And I'm the founder of Amplify and Faith. And I have the pleasure, the immense pleasure of introducing you to Jana Long, co-founder of Black Yoga Teachers Alliance. And we also have Tracee Stanley, Yoga Nidra instructor and author of Radiant Rest. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
So one of the things that we are doing this month, as we did last month, is to promote our new offering as a community sangha. Each of the presenters from Spirit Summit are having an opportunity to have their presentation rebroadcast, and so that we can in community go a little bit deeper into the subject matter. So thank you for taking part in that. I'm so excited about this match. It's because the practice that you all have in common comes from a place of deep contemplation and rest. And so one of the first things I'd love to ask you to share with the audience, who may or may not be familiar with you, is how did you solidify that this was your path, that this was the practice for you?
I'm going to have to ask you to repeat that, Jasmine, because it broke up a little.
Yeah, sure. So the question essentially is, Jana, how did your contemplative practice, how did you come to know that that was the best practice for you?
Okay, thank you. Oh, should I answer now? Okay. Well, first, let me say hello to everyone who is watching. And wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day. It's a snowy contemplative day here in Baltimore, Maryland. And how I came into contemplative practice is sort of the way I started yoga. You know, back in the 1970s, which is when I first discovered or was aware of yoga, it was nothing like it is now. There were not yoga studios in Washington, D.C., where I grew up, or yoga mats or any of that. So the coming together around this thing called yoga, when you could find people who were engaged in it, was more of coming together in Sangha. We were building a community, connecting with each other, and pondering life. Like, why am I here? Of course, I was a young woman at that time, a college student. And I guess the question that was arising in me was, who am I? Who am I? And I think there were other people on that road of seeking to understand who we are, why am I here? And there wasn't a lot of physical yoga, hatha yoga practice at that time. We got together, we talked, we ate, we made music, we sang, and we just had a good time, basically. And we called that practicing yoga. But as a result of that, you know, those lifelong connections were made. Unfortunately for me, many of the people, there were two Black people in my life at that time. One was a best friend who had been a Vietnam vet and had learned something about yoga when he was in Vietnam and then in Thailand. And then I had another friend, both who have since made their transition. But we were just a little pod of people connecting into the Sikh community, or Sikh, however you like to say that, which was growing in the Washington metropolitan area. So those were the people, if you know, who were, if you went to someone's house, except this one time, and I'll just tell this story real quick. I had a college professor who invited us to his home one day and one evening, and his partner was a woman from Thailand. And she was the one that introduced me to Journey in Satchidananda by Alice Coltrane. It was the very first time I'd ever heard that. And she began to do some yoga postures. In fact, we were practicing to Journey in Satchidananda. But it was also very casual, nothing formal and structured and classes. So the contemplative practice, I think, is my root, and then the physical practice followed.
Thank you, Jana. Appreciate taking us back to your roots and how that evolved for you.
Never left the root.
How about you, Tracee?
Well, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So I have maybe the opposite story as Jana, which is that I found Kundalini yoga first and then Hatha yoga. And I was very attracted to the physical asana practice of doing power yoga and vinyasa yoga. And it was what I thought yoga was really doing the postures and much more of the kind of performative, like how many handstands and how many arm balances can we do? And then one day I picked up a copy of the Yoga Sutras, and it was a translation. And I started reading it and I thought, well, wait a second. There's nowhere in here where anybody's talking about doing any kind of handstand and or anything really related to the kind of asana or yoga practice that I was practicing. And so I tried to find teachers that would kind of guide me towards the promise of the Yoga Sutras. And even though I had a career as a film producer at that time and I was not interested in teaching yoga, I did know that I wanted to provide a space for people to be able to practice yoga. And I opened up a small donation-only studio in West Hollywood and then decided that I wanted to take a teacher training. And when I took that teacher training, the first thing that happened, I think it was like the second day, we did a Tattva Shuddhi meditation. And I was so blown away by the effects of this meditation that seemed to just reveal something that had been hidden for such a long time that I thought, wait a second, this is something that I have to help to teach people. And I need to follow this path of yoga that is not just about yoga asana, but about all the other limbs of yoga. And as I said, I had a very busy career at that time. So being introduced to the practices of deep relaxation were something that I incorporated daily into my life and into my practice, and even then into my teaching, even before I really understood or knew what the depth of Yoga Nidra practice was. So that's how I kind of came to teaching the quieter forms of practice that I teach now in Yoga Nidra and meditation, that is also reflected in my own personal practice.
You mentioned a meditation practice earlier. I don't want to foul up and misname it. Could you explain a little bit more of what that is?
Well, that particular practice is a practice of purifying the elements. And so if we think about the fact that there's a universe inside of us that is kind of also representative of the universe that's outside, that we also have the elements within us. And when we start to purify those elements, we start to move from the more gross to the more subtle, which actually leads us towards an understanding of our true nature. So not to get too in depth into what the actual practice was, but it was a very powerful tantric practice.
It sounds like for both of you that your paths were healing. That those particular the paths that you follow were a calling for you, a line for you to continue and absorb into your life as a way of being. Can you share with us how you manage multiple pandemics that we're experiencing today?
Well, do you want to go first, Tracee? Well,
sure.
You look like you were ready. Go ahead.
No, well, you can go. Go ahead, because I feel like we're both ready to answer this question.
Well, I think the pandemic for me, in my view, there are many spiritual dimensions to this pandemic, and the way I'm perceiving it sort of segues into what Tracee just said about the tattvas, the elements, that we have become disconnected from nature, our nature, nature itself. And this pandemic, I think, is going to be with us until we recognize that we are not separate and apart from nature, but we are essentially a part of nature. And it is in us, within us, around us, through us, etc. And I say that because of the damage that the human activity has done to the planet. And we're seeing that we call it climate change, and we have polluted waters and animals going extinct, and so many things, not recognizing the interconnectedness of the planet that we live on, that it is an ecosystem and we are part of that ecosystem, no more important or less important than, say, the ant or the cat or the dog, the bird and the caterpillar. They all have a right, as we do, to participate in the elements and to play our role in maintaining the balance. So I see this pandemic as essentially recognition of the imbalance that we humans have created in our home, because this is our home. And I think until we clean up the house, the virus is already showing us that it can mutate much faster than we can create vaccines. And maybe going back to the root of what it would take to correct it. But I don't know if the will is there, because it may mean giving up for some. They may have to give up much of what they think they have. But the thing that we all want is a good life. And again, the pandemic is showing us all of the inequities in what we have created. So I think it's going to be with us for a while, and it's very difficult. Thank goodness for the contemplative practice, because that is one in which you must be with yourself. And not having practice, if you have not practiced that quiet and stillness and introspection, this is a very difficult time, but hopefully will learn to manage that and to be able to look at what arises. Once we come to that quiet, we may get some, and stillness, we may get some good ideas about how to move forward in a new way. That's what I'm hoping for. And that's something that I contemplate in my own life. How will I move forward from here?
Oh, I can't hear you.
There we go. I hear a lot of contemplation around there not being a new normal, right? Or we're having to form a new normal. There's anticipation of going back to the way we were, but constitutionally, we've all changed. We've all changed. Thank you for that, Jana. Tracee, how about you? How has Yoga Nidra helped you manage your experience in the pandemic or expand?
So, I mean, there's so many pandemics upon the pandemics. And I think the first and oldest pandemic is racism. And it's just that people have kind of woken up to it to some degree. And so I think that it comes back to the question that Jana said that she asked herself early on in her beginning of yoga is, who am I? Right? Is that when we ask that question to ourselves, like the great sage Ramana Maharshi did, we get to understand, who am I not? And what are the beliefs that I carry that are not true? And how can I start to dismantle that? And so, Yoga Nidra, because it is a practice of stillness, allows everything to be revealed, right? And it's revealed in the transitions between waking and sleeping and waking. And I completely agree. There's really nothing I can add to what Jana shared about the fact that we have just disregarded that we are part of nature. So there's nothing that I can add to that other than spending more time in nature and creating a relationship with nature, as opposed to having this extractive, relationship where nature is here for me in some way that I get to take and keep taking and taking and taking and not giving anything back in any way, shape, or form. The other thing that I would say is that, and also this is just pulling on a thread of what Jana shared about people changing behaviors, is that much in the same way that we sometimes are just disregarding the fact that this is our home, as Jana said, right? And it's also, we're disregarding this idea that it takes a community to be able to be whole. And so when you disregard others for whatever reason, you need to look at what that reason is, why you think you're more important than someone else, and how you can help other people when you are thriving and others are hurting. And so I really think that part of what we need is to really be able to be in community and to not only practice self-care and rest and stillness and contemplation for ourselves, but if we actually have these tools, I feel like we have a responsibility to share those tools in whichever way that is, whether it's I'm just sharing it with my mom today, like we're going to lay down for 5 minutes, or I'm sharing it with my community in a larger way. There's no way of sharing that's more important than the other way. It doesn't matter if you're sharing to 100 people or you're sharing to one person. That, I think, has a potential to heal. And so I don't disagree with Jana that this is going to be around for a little while, these myriad of things that are happening, but they're happening in a way that has the potential to wake us up to a greater good and a better world if we can actually become clear in the process while we're in the limbo, waiting for one thing to change. Because like you said, there is no, going back. Consciousness has already shifted. If your consciousness has not caught up to the fact that it has already changed, then you have to get still and do some practice.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. But, I was thinking about the first time I experienced yoga nidra, one of the first times. It was a new practice for me that came along when I decided to, I guess, do yoga teacher training, even though that was 30 years after having a yoga practice, but, getting the certification and all of that. But the great thing was that I was exposed to yoga nidra for the first time, and I was just remembering that feeling, that experience of just such deep relaxation and my consciousness moving. And at one point, I'm there and I'm in the twilight zone, and I kept hearing this noise. It was so annoying. It was like, and in my mind, I'm thinking, God, what is that? Please stop. And then as I came out, or the consciousness shifted, I realized it was my own snoring.
Yeah.
And, that's something, yoga nidra is something that when people are introduced to it, and I bet you can confirm this, Tracee, don't they just beg for it? They just want more and more.
Yes, yes. That and that is really how I knew early on, before I was even calling it yoga nidra, because it was really just introduced at first to me as a guided shavasana, that we needed this. Everybody needs this. It's like and this is 20 years ago. We need it more now than ever, because we have all of the technology and all the things that, so yes. And I can identify with that. I wish that person next to me would stop snoring. And then you're like, wait, that's me. So I get that.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, Tracee. I took my first class with you at the Asheville Yoga Festival several years ago, and I had the very same experience Jana's described. But it was spectacular. It was like taking a ride somewhere, but consciousness is there. I knew I was in a place, but I was also someplace else, and it was so wonderful to be able to expand my own experience in that way. So thank you for sharing these beautiful stories. I have a question for the audience, if you don't mind answering.
Yeah.
One question is, when feelings like hurt, anger, sadness are overwhelming, what's the best way to handle them in the moment if you're in the middle of like a work situation?
See, I would need some clarification. Feelings are overwhelming. I'm not sure I know what that means. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that means, because I tend to move toward my feelings. I don't try to shut down what I'm feeling. But I also think, because I've had a contemplative practice for a long time, I also have some balance of my emotional state. And that's what contemplative practice gives you, the ability, when something is arising within you, to not be so reactive, but if you can, look at, why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling this? Is it in me? Is it a pattern of behavior? It takes time to develop that. I've been practicing. Next year will be my 50th year practicing yoga. I wasn't always here. So I just want to say that. It was, I haven't, it doesn't just happen for you. That's why it's a practice. You must continue to do this for the rest of your life. So, once you have established a contemplative state, or you have learned to meditate in a way that serves you, what do I mean by that? Where you can actually self reflect, so that when you're out in the world and this word that's out here now, that's, in the lexicon, trigger, 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 everybody's getting triggered. We used to just call it being pissed off or whatever. I don't know if that's the same thing, but often that can have something to do with uh, some seed within you that you have not quite resolved. See, it's not the other. See, I always look at it this way. It's not the other person. It's not somebody else's bad behavior but it's something about that directed towards me that then ignites a seed within me that I'm not comfortable with. Why not? Why can't I just say that person has no manners, does not know how to interact with other people or whatever it may be? I've kind of gotten to that point. I rarely, sometimes I wonder, do I have emotions at all anymore? Because they don't move from one extreme to the other. But it takes time. But I always move into my feelings and maybe go sit, and I really want to understand, why am I feeling this way? And sometimes the root of that is very deep seated. And this is another reason why yoga nidra is important. Because when that mind is moving, sometimes some of that deeply repressed consciousness or awareness, we've taken in everything since we've been born, but you don't hold on to all of it with awareness. It's there. And when you're in yoga nidra, sometimes things bubble up to the surface of the mind that, again, you can contemplate. And often I think uh, things that happen to us as children, when we don't have the words to articulate or process our feelings, but we're carrying that feelings of not being good enough, for example. That's so common in people. I don't feel good enough. You feel insecure about whatever it could be. Look at all the women, Black women, huge insecurities and self-abuse around hair. I mean, but that could come from being burned with a straightening comb. Your mama telling you, sit still, bring your nappy head over here, and how you're talked to. Sure, you obey as a child, but what does that do to your sense of self? We're not going to be perfect, but then you can look at that as an adult. You don't have to hold on to that for the rest of your life if you have the ability to see it, and then to know and to forgive mama or whoever, and to recognize that has no root in any reality. As Tracee said, I don't need to own that. I don't have to wear that. Why am I doing that to myself? So I say, move into your feelings and be quiet. We don't have to react immediately to everything. Take a moment.
Ashe. I love also, Jana, how you began answering the question, seeking clarity in the question, right? There's just a need for clarity about what it is that what other person may be asking of you, instead of jumping into assumption and being led astray by feeling. So thank you for that. Thank you for modeling that. Tracee, would you like to answer or add anything?
Yeah. Yeah, I will just add that my suggestion would be to focus on the time when you're not at work, using that time to practice meditation so that you build the capacity to be able to witness the emotions and to witness the feelings and the sensations as they arise. That will give you a bit of distance to be able to know what to do, right? So that would really be my suggestion is, and maybe even doing a bit of reading in the Yoga Sutras about samskaras and vasanas and how they form and how they start to create a coloring which causes you to react to situations and to things, so that you also have an understanding of the workings of the mind from a yogic perspective. Those would be the two things that I would offer.
Constant self-study. Mm-hmm.
It never ends. It's not going to end.
That's right. That's a huge part. That's part of the svadhyaya. You're seeking knowledge, but you're also self-knowledge. And that's the hardest. So you can read a book. You can get books and read and digest information that is indirect like that. But understanding yourself, knowing yourself is the hardest thing to know. That's the most difficult because we project out. And that's why we say, you made me mad or you make me happy. Not that that resides within me and I own that feeling. And when it arises, why? Because I hold the joy, I hold the anger. The person is the catalyst, but you don't, again, it's the opportunity to delve deeper into yourself, to excavate so that you don't continue to replicate the same patterns if they do not serve your life. So you want to get rid of what doesn't serve you and hold on to that helps you to rise higher in your consciousness and your awareness.
And that's a lot of work, which is why the need for rest is imperative, right? The need for that rest is imperative.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to honor the time.
I just want to say, I honestly don't think a lot of people are resting right now, because I think this technology that we have to live on and live our lives this way, I find it, I'll speak again, and I tend to speak from a direct experience. I don't know what your experience is. I find it to be very exhausting. I find it's something that if I'm on too long, disrupts my sleep patterns. I may fall asleep, but I may not have a restful sleep because my mind is still chattering while I'm asleep. And finding the balance when you have to live so much of your whole life, just about virtually. I don't think a lot of us are getting the rest we need. And it's really difficult to take care of yourself right now in living a virtual existence is, I think, counter to self-care. I say shut it all down and go out and plant some flowers. I'm not joking.
Yes. Right? That's real. And it goes back.
Food, plant some flowers, look at the birds, shut that stuff off. And as Tracee said, go out in nature. I just want to say, I think I think nature is what sustained our ancestors when they were enslaved. To the extent, yes, their labor was forced from them, for sure. But the the work that they did that kept them connected to the earth, I think was to some extent a salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot, it's impossible to not feel the earth when you are connected to it in that way, when you are growing, when you are cultivating, when you are weeding, pulling, when you are walking through, etc. It's impossible not to feel connected to it. And that experience of that connection serves, supports your health and your spirit. You know, they were dealing with external conditions. If it, you know, working all day, sunrise to sunset, getting beat, little food, all of that, those are externals. But I think the work itself, the connection to the earth itself, was what sustained them, what brought the songs on, because many of the songs were in the fields to keep going. And I'm saying that to say, when I get back in my yard this year, I'm actually going to plant some cotton.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what that's like. What was that like? I'm actually going to grow some cotton, and just as a way of reconnecting. We have to create these rituals to reconnect with what has been taken or lost in our lives, and not to look at that as something unpleasant, or it's a reality. And why don't you see what that was like, if you can, for your ancestors? You will have so much more respect for them if you do.
Jana, that's deep. My practice isn't there yet, but I'll look at it.
Everybody can't do that. I know. I know.
I ain't ready.
Saying.
So
you know,
I know
I go out there.
Yeah, no, you do. And I wanted to respect that we are over just by 10 minutes, but I wanted to make sure that the audience was aware of what you all have coming up. If you want to share any conferences or book releases or anything that you all have.
Yeah, so my book, Radiant Rest, is coming out on March 9th. You can get it on pre-order now. The book is just a prayer from me to the goddess Yoga Nidra, to the earth, as this unconditional support that we have, to all the teachers and lineages that I've practiced over the years, and really to the householder, to the person that doesn't have the time to sit down every day or lay down every day for 2 hours and do practice. You know, it's really giving you little mini practices that you can weave throughout your day so that your life becomes the practice. And it's not just only when you're walking into the studio or coming into a virtual space, that you really turn your life into a ritual. And anybody who wants to find out about the book or about me more, you can go to radiantrest.com. Thank you. Happy to have been here today.
I just want to say this is the 5th year for the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance. And we will have our conference online this year, August 20th through the 22nd. So we're busy planning that. And as for me, oh God. I'm drawing a blank. I know I'm doing something next week. I'm offering a prayer actually for a group. It's a bunch of stuff coming on, but right now I'm having a brain fog and I'm just so terrible at self-promotion. But I will promote VITA. I can remember that. And we're really happy that we've survived as a nonprofit for 5 years. It's a wonderful feeling. So I hope people will join us in August. There'll be more about that.
Thank you so much. And I keep trying to unmute Tracee, but it's not working. Maybe Tracee can unmute herself.
Yes, I just unmuted.
Okay, great. So if there's one last thing you'd like to leave with the audience, what would that be?
Find a way to weave the practice into your life. It will expand your capacity to hold and to be held.
And I would just say, if yoga isn't part of your life, then what is it? That I just have to turn. Then what is it? If it's something that you go somewhere and you set aside some time to do some exercise, then maybe you need to expand that practice. You should carry, I agree with Tracee 100%. Yoga is a living practice. It's a state, it's the state of your being. You should always be practicing yoga. Always. And that has nothing to do with being on the mat necessarily. That helps your body, but once you get off the mat, then what?
Mm-hmm.
It should infiltrate every activity and every experience of your life because it's the seed within you. Takes time though. Keep practicing. Keep practicing.
Ashe. Thank you. Thank you both so much. This was so rich. In a short amount of time, you were able to drop such juicy gems for everyone. So thank you so much for giving of your time, giving of yourself, loving on us constantly, and contributing your beautiful gifts to the world. We love and appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Yeah,
that's right. We're a family. We are a family, and that's the beautiful thing. I just have to say this: co-founding BITA and Black Yoga Teachers Alliance, and moving, to this 5th year, and watching how this sense of family. I remember when it was 30 years before I encountered another kind of certified black yoga teacher who was holding classes in yoga. 30 years in the making, but now we're everywhere. They're more on the way. I think there should be a yoga teacher in every family. That should be our goal, a yoga teacher in every family, not necessarily as a business, but there is that leader within every family that helps to share these tools. And that could be, I'm going to say that's a goal of Black Yoga Teachers Alliance. Whether you do it as a business, that's another story, but someone with the knowledge who can support the family, the community, the friends. We should work towards that.
I love that. That just solidifies our family and expands our connectivity to each other, and reminding us to continuously reconnect to our own humanity in our hearts. I love that. Thank you so much. Again, please join us at the Sangha on Friday, March 12th. We'll be rebroadcasting Jana's presentation, Yoga of the Mind, and you'll get to hear this yummy, delicious, contemplative practice of yoga. Make sure you check out Tracee's book, her podcast, Radiant Rest, and we'll see you out soon, hopefully in person.
I hope so soon, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Take care.
Take care. Love you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Nice to meet you, Tracee. Thank you, Jasmine.
Love you, Jana. Bye.
Bye-bye.